Okay, we are live.
Everybody's mic's on. Good. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order and have the pledge and invocation. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Almighty God, we thank you as we come together for all the folks that were just here, for all the things that are going on at the high school. And we ask that you'd bless the staff, and we ask that you'd bless the students, and also the guardians, as they all are a team working for the success of the kids. And not just here, but in all the schools in the county. And we ask that you would bless us tonight, that you would guide us in our decision-making to help all of their activities have success, to help the students have success. Amen.
Amen.
And we have only one public left, and he's recording things, so no public comment, and student and staff recognition.
None at this time.
And the next thing we have is the minutes for the January 21st meeting. We've received those minutes. Are there any corrections or objections to them, or do we have a motion to approve them as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve them. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Then all in favor of approving the minutes for the January 21st board meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion passes. And that brings us now down to personnel.
We have nothing under resignations and retirement. Under permission to post, I would recommend that we post an extracurricular assistant cheerleading coach, grades 7 through 12.
Our superintendent's recommending that we grant permission to post extracurricular assisting cheerleader coach, grades 7 to 12. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any questions? If there is none, then all in favor of granting permission to post that extracurricular position, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion passes. Employment of personnel.
Tanya Hedrick, itinerant behavior special education teacher at FES. Sierra Bramman, half-time itinerant aide with autism mentor and CPI certification at FES. Lindsay Props, extracurricular homebound teaching position. Adam Ruddle, substitute bus driver, and Sierra Bramman, restricted substitute teacher. I recommend approval of personnel as presented.
Superintendent's recommending the approval of the personnel as presented. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any questions? Then all in favor of approving the personnel, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion passes. They are approved.
And that concludes the personnel section of the agenda.
So with the personnel concluded, now we are at finance.
All right, so we do have several items for finance tonight. Under 6A, we will have the treasurer's report. For 6A, I'm going to pull that up here. It's the month of January, not a lot of activity in the month of January as far as any extraordinary items. We did have receipts for the month of just over $906,000, beginning fund balance of just over $2.7 million, disbursements $1,061,634.89, ended with a $2.592 million fund balance, so went down, roughly $150,000 or so. But that's not bad for the wintertime when the grants and state aid and taxes are not flowing like they would be later in the year or earlier in the year. So pretty solid, hanging in there here at the end of January in our cash position. We did have $50 Pitney Bows that crossed over the month, so that to balance that out for our postage meter. A couple of details: 4.43% interest rate, $10,747 interest for the month. So the interest rate is creeping down a bit, but it's still fairly solid. And $65,221.39 since July 1st, which is still very good as far as interest revenue goes. So the bills which will be coming up are going to have $186,403 in electronic payments, total bills, and then we break them, subtract out withholdings. Match that with gross payroll. So gross payroll for the month was almost $800,000 for the two payrolls that we had on the 5th and the 20th. That's some information on the details. So again, starting with a 2.747 million fund balance, ending with a 2.592 million fund balance. But given, again, January, that is still a good cash position for us as of January 31, 2025.
I recommend approval of the treasurer's report for January 2025.
Our superintendent recommends approval of the treasurer's report for January 2025. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or any questions? Then all in favor of approving the treasurer's report with an ending balance of $2,592,855.83, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Okay, so the next item for tonight is 6B, the bills for January 2025. We just referred to them, and now we will look at them in more detail. So again, not a lot of extraordinary. So the total bills were regular bills, $186,403.82. Electronic means comes out automatically or paid at the end of the month electronically, $497,090.02. $497,090.02 that we just mentioned. A couple highlighted, second page of the PDF, page 2 of the bills. Aptigee is our communication system that does the school call-outs. It helps us to do social media on Facebook and Twitter and those sorts of things. Christine Lambert does a lot. They're individual persons at each school. Sometimes it's a principal or a technology person that goes on to there. Our annual subscription, $8,110 for Aptigee with the websites, Facebook, the calling program. That's our annual renewal. The second one, Edmentum Virtual School. So it's not like the virtual school that we had when we were in COVID. Carrie, can you maybe mention an example of somebody that would use Edmentum for virtual school?
So we have some students in the county, about 20 students in the county, grades 6 through 12, who do virtual classes instead of coming into the building. All of their coursework is online. We have some students who do a blended schedule, so some in person, some online. But Edmentum is the program that we use, and so all of their coursework, their teachers, everything is through this program, and then they assign the grades, and then we are able to transcribe the grades for them.
Right. So I think it's very good. Now, as we discuss internally, of course, this account code, I don't expect to mean anything to the board members, but a Fund 11 account code means it's county or state funded. If it's a 61, it's a special grant. Like here's 61 for child nutrition, okay, up here. So, during COVID, we got a lot of these things started and ramped up and got some good things going with the COVID money that ended September 30th of 2024. So we're trying to maintain and continue those, but there are a number of them that total 10,000 here, 20,000 there, that we're paying for out of some Step 7 funds. Step 7 has increased from the state, but that long term, that's a concern that we have to evaluate every year as we look at different budget issues. And we're very solid right now, but we are adding some things to the general budget that haven't been there over time. And so we have to factor all those things in as we take into consideration funding. And so right now we're able to continue those, and we think that's an example of a very good one. But that's something that we would have paid several years worth of, right from 2020 until now, with the COVID funds. That came in very handy for that purpose. But again, that's just an example. So if it's 11 in the front, it's all regular county or state funding. If it's a 61 here, this is a special education grant there. And so that's just, and there's different kind of grants in Fund 61. And so at any rate, it's an example of something we try to look at, pay attention to as we go forward, and how, every year, what can we do as we go forward with that. So again, total bills, $497,090.02. So relatively small month, but we will certainly have other bills that come up as we go throughout the year. So $497,090.02.
Is that virtual school, is that per student, is it a blank
That
column?
number,
Yeah, is that the cost per, is it
That-
based on the number of students?
so like JP was saying, we had, whenever Travis was still doing virtual school and we had COVID money, we paid a lot extra, and we've been using that extra payment up until this year, where we're now having to pay for our students.
But
So
how is
that-
it based per student? Is it just like
It's
a
based
blanket contract
per class.
per class?
Per class. So a student may have two
Oh, okay.
classes if they're doing a blended schedule, or they might have 8. So it's per class.
Per student, per class. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
You have my recommendation to pay the bills for the month of January 2025.
Our superintendent's recommending we pay the bills. Do we have a motion? And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any questions? Then all in favor of paying $497,090.02 in bills, please signify by saying aye. And opposed, no. Motion passes.
Okay, the next item, 6C for budget revisions, just budget transfers for tonight. We periodically, every few months, take a look at where we may have budgeted in the beginning of the year that we now have some surplus funds, because we have some more long-term substitutes, for example, than we may have been expecting, taking from some salary accounts to a long-term sub-account. The state wants us to track vacant positions separately to, in theory, ask the state for additional funding to show the vacancies. So this 161, for example, regular ed 161, adding 50,000 to that code, 120,000 to special education 161, and that's countywide that we're putting those in there. And so we're taking away from, we had some regular substitute funds down here, we had some additional insurance funds, additional regular salary. So we're taking away from some that we now have surplus, transferring it to some of the long-term vacancy. A little bit of repair and maintenance, nothing alarming, 35,000, adding to that. Some telephone services for internet, adding 10,000 to. A couple contractors, some work we've been having done, adding 30,000. So left-hand side that we are increasing these line items. The right-hand side we are decreasing or moving those line items out. So the total transfers, and this number 307 transfer for tonight, is $258,500. We periodically will have to do other transfers as well, but this should catch us up to date for a while until, these are somewhat projections until the end of the year. We may have to fine tune them towards the very end of the year, but some of these long-term sub-vacancies we're trying to project up until the end of the year. So $258,500 for transfer number 307.
I recommend approval budget revision and transfer 307.
Our superintendent's recommending that we approve this budget revision. Do we have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any questions? Then all those in favor of approving the transfer 307 in the amount of $258,500, please signify by saying aye. And opposed, no. Motion passes.
Okay, so now I have several items here under financial update. I'll see what order they come up. 6C financial update. So I will start, I guess, with board financial report to 425. And so it's a synopsis you've seen somewhat before that kind of shows where we are for the current year. The treasurer's report shows we are in a cash position. This shows actual expenditures to budget, so it's not going to all match exactly with cash. It's not going to be real far off, but sometimes it's not going to match exactly. So it shows, for example, all the and this is all our Fund 11. Our Fund 11, which is where we have to watch over as far as having enough surplus in there to meet a balanced budget or enough balance. So professional salaries, even after the transfer, so now we're 129 to the good there. So there's still in salaries and regular salaries, still 508,000. Of course, some of those substitutes will be paid out and they're not in encumbrances, so those will come down. So then you have health, dental, and vision, Social Security, other fixed costs grouping. You have utilities, which is like water and sewer mainly. Energy comes separately under Object 600. So energy, for example, we have budgeted $413,000. spent 239, but yet we still have electric bills and propane bills to pay. So most of this 173 will be used up. We try to encumber with purchase orders, salary and most everything that we can. We don't necessarily do utilities, although we could, but we kind of know that amount. So all that being said, we get to the bottom and we're showing 2.686 million to the good right now, 2.686 million. However, we have the year-end child nutrition transfer to make, which will be around 400,000. We have remaining substitutes and utilities to be paid. That'll be multiple hundreds. A lot of the other purchase orders like maintenance, transportation, we have blanket POs that go out, and those are already encumbered. So do I think we will end the year between 1.5 to 1.8 million surplus? I think we will. Some of these POs will come off the books at the end of the year. Some are a little bit conservative. We may have other things that pop up that we're not expecting. This is just the expense side. We will take a look at the revenue side at a future meeting, which seems very solid and expected to meet expectations. One concern on that we'll talk about here in a minute. So again, right now, 2.696 million to the good. Now, several months ago, this was over 3 million. And I said this would reduce over time. So it has. It's still very much on track, but just a kind of a snapshot of where we are. And it says 28th is just run in the month of February, includes the first February payroll, but it's as of today, February 4th, is where we are with that. So that's just information for you as board members. Now, the one concern on revenue, which isn't gone yet, it's just a concern. We used to receive about $120,000 a year in forest land secure rural schools. They redid the formula last year looking at poverty, and we got bumped down to around 75,000. Well, it's up for renewal as it is every 2 or 3 years. They had hoped to get it renewed, reauthorized in Congress before December. It didn't happen. The Senate passed it, but the House did not. So it's in limbo again. So, is there a chance it's going to get renewed? There is a chance. This is just information about the legislation. At the same time, we'll go to the second one. This is from the Rural School Coalition. The House didn't act to pass what the Senate had passed. So this coalition is going to try to get funding for FY24. So FY24 federal funding funds us for FY25. So we have $70,000 in our budget for 25 that hasn't been authorized by Congress yet. Now, out of the 31 years I've been here, I think 30 years we have received it. 1 year we didn't. But again, I don't know exactly what's going to happen at the federal level at this point. So we're looking at, do we budget anything for next year under forest land funding? Are we going to get the current year? And then beyond, can we get a multi-year reauthorization? So I do know that senators and representatives are aware, and it probably if it could get to the floor and get a vote, I believe it would pass. But there's a lot of discussion that it has to be attached to another bill somewhere. 1 year it was attached to a Helium Act. It was just nothing to do with secure rural schools, but it was attached to a Helium Act, and it got funded. And so, it's still a concern, obviously. A bigger concern for Pocahontas that gets 300,000 or 400,000, Randolph about 200,000 or 300,000, but still a concern for us. Not as big as the 1,400 floor, but 70,000 is still 70,000, and it adds up over time. So anytime you do talk to federal representatives or even other key state personnel, obviously that's something we're still concerned about. And I do know they're going to continue to try to get this passed again, especially on the House. We will see where it fits in, how it goes. There is bipartisan support in the Senate, and I believe there's bipartisan support in the House. But again, it has to get actually passed and authorized and, of course, signed off on to be done. So as of yet, there is no passage for our FY25 funds or anything for 26 at this point. I think there's a reasonable chance it will be funded, but I know a lot of things are kind of upended right now, so we will have to see as that goes through. The last item under 6D, I believe right now, is WVU extension request. You can see as some of these federal funds go away, as things change economically, you know, and combination of factors as state funds, federal funds, and we've talked about the state budget concerns. Entities are starting to look at, you know, where can we find funds as state funds or federal funds may be less. So now at the Extension Office, they're being told, now we have been informed, maybe that's WVU Extension, I don't know, whoever oversees the funding for the Extension Office, they need to increase their local match to $25,000 between the County Commission and BOE. We've never really had a formal discussion with the Extension Office about this. The library has come different times over the years. The library has its own formula, and the Board of Ed has stepped up there to almost double library funding in the past 6 or 8 years. So we've just but now they're coming with an official request. Right now, that $25,000 is $17,600, with $11,600 from the County Commission and $6,000 from the BOE. So they need it by the 26-27 years. They don't need it for the upcoming year. They don't need us to change anything. They need it, and again, you know, we really don't specify, well, how much is the County Commission going to increase versus how much the BOE is. What she is asking for, Brooke is asking for, would we consider a 2-year phase-in of increasing it to a certain amount to help get to the $25,000 match. And so that's what they are asking for. Their budget, their committee meets February 26th. Obviously, you know, the board can make a decision before then, or we can say, you know, our budget won't be done until middle of May. We won't know what the legislature will do. We don't know all the federal funding and Title I and that sort of thing. So there's different options. We can leave it as is, or we can communicate something to the Extension Office. So this is just information for the BOE to consider. It's not for action tonight. It is just information. So again, right now, and she does highlight very well some of the items that they do here in the county and with the second agent. So,
What would they want our amount to be? And what's county commission going to do?
well,
If we maintain the same percentage, the 6,000 would change to 8,500.
8,500.
and that's one way to look at it, what our percentage of the local match is now. And then that's something the commission could probably, you know, look at and understand why we're looking at it that way. So, at any rate, that is information.
If you're okay, we'll put it on the next board agenda.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, that's fine. So,
So that's something for us to think about too.
right. So it's just basic information. And it is a request, again, so that's not for action. Basic information for you. And I
Maybe
think,
we can see what the county commission's looking at too. I mean,
Lisa put that under new business for us.
right.
Yeah.
And obviously, with the news, it's not really a handout. We had different concerns from different people in the past 2 weeks about the federal freeze or anything, and several teachers asking. Of course, now it's somewhat off the table, but teachers funded out of Title I or special education, talked to Mr. Hedrick. We put out a memo reassuring our teachers paid with federal funds. And there's about, between teachers and service personnel, there's 8 to 10 personnel paid strictly out of federal. Title I has professional. The special ed has more service personnel. And we were assured by the state that that's not going to change their funding for this year. Now, could we get less Title I money in FY26? I guess we could. I mean, we don't know yet. Could we get less special ed money in FY26 from I guess we could. You know, so we hope not, but, you know, we could. And so we just have to be aware of that. It doesn't affect anybody's salary or anything for the current year. All that money is down at the state level to be forwarded to us as we draw that down over time. But another factor to consider as we move forward with the budget. So that's all I have on a financial update.
Get that. Thank you. Any questions for JP? Thank you. Now we move to facilities.
Okay, got a couple things here, just mainly updates. Last Thursday, we met with some folks from ZMM, took a look at Franklin Elementary. Our plan is to try to submit a MIP, Major Improvement Project grant, this spring, and looking specifically at the controls at Franklin Elementary and the HVAC system at Franklin Elementary. And so they came in and we gathered a lot of data and information on the systems that are in place down there and the faults that we're running into. And so we had a really good meeting. They had a couple of their engineers and architects in taking a look at the project, and they're going to start working on their end to put the best application in there that we possibly can, so hopefully we can get some funding to correct some of those things at Franklin Elementary. The second thing is the Department of Education, West Virginia Department of Ed, they have some funds set aside for safety, and there was a deadline of Friday for application, and we did put an application in for a couple things here at the high school, so we'll see if we get any of that funding or not. You could apply for up to $50,000, and so I asked for $50,000 for a couple things here at the high school, and looking mainly at the things that our safety officer that comes through, some of the improvements that he would like to see at this school, and so that's kind of what I focused on. We have a small project started at the Klein Building, working with CAN. Their drop-off spot where it's the old double doors that are glass, they keep having issues with the glass breaking in those. So we've started that project a little bit, and basically we're going to take those glass doors out and we're going to put a roll-up door in there that's automated, that they can just push a button and it'll roll up and they can back right up to the door without having to back into the doors. And so hoping that that'll get accomplished here in the next week or so, with Lance doing most of that work for us. So we're moving forward with that. Is there any questions?
Is that the ones the customers go in and out of? Or
The
those
customers
that
don't go in and out of
They don't.
those.
Unload stuff.
It's where they unload at.
Okay.
And they run in, people back into it, and they fixed it a few times, and
Okay.
we've looked at it, and the best option is we put some pillars there so they can't back into it anymore. And
Okay.
we're gonna put a nice door where they can push a button and it rolls up for them, and
That'd be nice.
they don't have to raise a garage door or something like that. So it'll be a nice improvement for that building. So
What's the issue with hot water they were asking about?
well, it's kind of like in your house when your hot water heater is so far away from those bathrooms, you got to turn on and let it run a little while, and it's just the time thing, I think, more than anything. Now there is a circulation system that's supposed to circulate that water and keep it somewhat close to that bathroom, but I think for years it's not been working like it's supposed to be working. So we'll take a look at that and see what we can come up with. What we installed at the board office was, it's kind of like the instant ones that's right under the sink. To me, I mean, I know it's going to be some electrical to get power underneath those sinks, but honestly, that's probably the cheapest fix because, for example, down in the gym, at one time that water had to come from underneath the gym all the way across the ceiling and down into the locker rooms to get hot water. Well, that's going to take time, and so we moved that and put it in the girls' locker room. But still, it's got to go from the girls' locker room all across up the ceiling, across the ceiling, down into the girls' bathroom or the men's bathroom, or even over into the boys' locker room. So it's a time thing. But we'll take a look and see what we can do. But that system we have there at the board office with those things mounted right under the sink is, you click it on, you hear it click on, and the hot water's there instantly. It seems to me like that would probably be a decent thing to take a look at to see. I mean, you look at the number of bathrooms here, it'd be a little bit of cost to probably get
They
it
use
done.
quite a bit of electricity.
Yeah, but it's probably cheaper than trying to figure out the
Yeah.
other systems, but we'll see what we can do and take a look at it.
What about a booster pump somewhere in your line?
Well, and I think that's what we somewhat have, that should circulate that hot water. And then mixing valves and all that other stuff to try to keep it warm and not too hot, not too cool, so we'll take a look and see what we can maybe come up with. But it's a lot of water's got to move around this building. It doesn't take much for it to, get off task a little bit. So
Congratulations on having the alt ed building.
yeah, it was nice to see that up there, and it seems like they're very appreciative of that.
I
Yep.
saw Mr.
That's
Hebner
nice.
over in town this evening asking, he just lit up like a Christmas tree how much he liked the building.
Yeah,
Said he got a little, I think you needed a rug outside. I think he had talked to you about, like mud or something.
I haven't heard anything about
Okay,
it.
and so there's a lot of echoes, and that's why maybe they get some of those panels to put on the wall, like we did.
Yeah, and I noticed when I've been in there, it's that kind of that situation too. There's not a lot on the walls.
Yeah.
So
We put them like in Norfolk, just
Yeah.
panels you put up, take the echo out.
yep.
So
But you
congratulations.
still lit
on
up
that.
like a Christmas tree.
Good. Good.
What about, did you get those radiant heaters?
They are not. They were supposed to be shipped, and then when we went back and checked on them, they were supposed to be shipped on the 4th, which is
Today.
today.
Okay.
So yeah, so we'll hope that I'll check with Tyler again just to see if they actually.
I was just
did get
curious
shipped,
to
but-
see if,
Yeah,
how
hopefully
they
we
were
get those in.
working.
Well, hopefully we don't get that cold again, because ever since we got out of that cold snap, we're back up where we need to
Yeah.
be. It's just whenever it gets down to 0 in there with the concrete walls and the snow sitting on the roof, it's like an ice box there on that side.
how about the alt ed building? Like, were they using it during that cold snap? I was just
The alt
wondering.
ed building?
Yeah,
So the alt ed building's got 2 mini splits in it.
so
It's comfortable in there.
good,
So
okay.
whether it's hot or it's cold, it's nice in there.
Good.
Each end has its own mini split. They can adjust it to wherever they want it to be. And back in the summer, we were running it, just to make sure it was staying cool. And then I flipped it over to the heat mode before they moved in, and I went back in and checked, and it was really comfortable in there.
We might eventually have to do that at the board office,
We
maybe.
may have to. The worst thing is those mini splits are good for like a room, but whenever you have all the offices, you don't have any
Yeah.
control. So you'd almost have to have a mini split per office, and which
Yeah.
that isn't
Right.
gonna happen.
Yeah.
What about our curtains at Norfolk, where we stand?
I have not heard anything on that one. Don't have any updates on that.
Travis, I just had one thing out here, where you go out to the gym, where we used to come in all the
Mhm.
time. Have you noticed all the debris and debris, not debris, debris?
Debris.
Yes, leaves and stuff. Is that
Yeah.
like blowing there?
It
or
does.
is
The wind comes in there and circulates that around in there. And then they need to get a blower or something and try to keep
Yeah.
that up a little better. And that's a bad spot for ice because their sun
It
does
is,
not
'cause
hit in there.
Somebody come out one night about,
Yeah.
I mean,
And
they
so
got
that's why there's a
several.
lot of sand thrown down there to try to keep some extra
Yeah.
traction and stuff.
'cause
But
it,
that's,
yeah, I thought
that is a bad spot for
I
stuff
thought they
to
were
blow
gonna
in there.
fall. Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's something that they need to keep a little bit
I
more
don't
of a
know. Yeah.
priority to keep it blown out of there, because what happens then is every time you open the door, and it's one reason why we stopped using that as an entrance to the ball games, because every time
Come
you
in.
open the door, the leaves come through, and then they end up getting out on your surface of the floor, which we don't want to get that tracked in, and as you throw salt and everything else out there, it gets tracked in your basketball court.
Okay.
So, and I will update a little bit on one of the other things that they had on their list was the lockers in this building. And so I brought a guy in from over in the Parkersburg area, John Davis, and we went through the whole building, measured all the lockers, how many lockers, and the quote for, and I kind of looked at it as in phases. So like phase one, and do like the downstairs up here, and then the upstairs, and he's saying between $75,000 and $80,000 just to do this section of lockers here in the middle school. Basically putting everything back the way it is. Slanted roof, slanted top, so they can't sit on stuff on top of it. Basically about the same thing. And, he said before COVID, you're probably looking at half that amount. But when COVID hit and the cost of making the lockers and stuff, he said it's just skyrocketed in the amount that it costs. But that just kind of gives you a ballpark, and we can talk about that at the office a little bit more, see what we can do to help with that. But so you think about that, in 3 different phases. It's a good bit of money, and we might possibly have somebody that's interested in helping us with start this thing that I've got to work with a little bit more. Once we can kind of figure out what maybe we can put together as a board to support that. But I would agree with what they say. You come in here at your open house, for example, and they're bringing the 7th graders in for the first time, and I mean they struggle. And not necessarily. Sometimes it's the lockers are just malfunctioning because they've been used for quite a few years. But we've had to cut some of them open here recently just to get the kids' stuff out of them, so they're boarded up. But it is time to start thinking about trying to replace those lockers. And we could probably break it up in a couple more phases if we wanted to, but we didn't really add anything. We didn't take anything away, and that's still about the cost of it. So
Could there be an MIP grant one of these days, maybe?
Well, JP and I were talking about that the other day. I don't think we could fit that in there. You think you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about it briefly. Somebody else mentioned it, and historically, the SBA has not funded MIP grants for things like lockers.
Okay.
I mean, maybe if you're building a new school, and so the MIP is more for safety needs or HVAC needs or things like that. Doesn't mean down the road we couldn't ask for something like that, or we could at least have an informal conversation with them where we believe they would tell us no on that. But I mean, would be nice if we had a ready source of funding for that. It would be nice for that.
In lockers, I can remember years ago when we developed the 4 lockers, the doors where the kids could practice. That was one of the biggest concerns of a 7th grader, not be able to get between classes and get that
And
locker
it still is.
in amount of time. And we still have that unit with the,
Yeah, we do.
that we send
And we
around.
take it out to the schools in the spring, and they practice that before they come. But it's still an issue, and even probably into, and she will know more than I do, but probably even deeper into the school year, they still don't have it mastered by the end of the first 9 weeks. Sometimes, you know, you still see them out there struggling, and you know, and the worst thing comes down to it, then they try to rig the locker door to where it doesn't lock itself, you know, so they can just come up and open. But then that also opens it up for other things where people take stuff out of those lockers and stuff. So
We put stuff in.
but we'll put stuff in. Yeah, that's very, very good possibility that way too. So, but yeah, I've been working with Martin and Nicole on that most of the year, and we've got some numbers to go on now, but
Are the new ones you looked at, combination lock, or are they digital?
just the same thing like
Same
these
thing.
are. Yeah.
I'm surprised it's not digital. Yeah,
No, that would probably add to the cost.
I'm sure.
Yeah. And you know, you could go back to, you know, not putting the combo, and you could let each kid bring their own lock, but then you just run into a whole lot of other things. You end up cutting off more locks when they've lost a key, or they've forgotten their combination. At least this way, we do have a master key that we can go and open it up with, and we know the combinations to all the lockers. But
Or if you ever had an inspection in too, if you wanted to inspect
Yeah.
all the lockers.
yeah, that's the other thing too. At least you can get into them. So that's kind of why I asked for basically the exact same thing as what we had.
And the sad thing is the prices will probably never come down.
Nah.
You
If
know, what-
anything, it's probably
What
going
went
to
up
get
in
worse.
COVID is
Yeah,
never
depends
gonna.
what country
come
the
back
lockers, the steel may come from.
Yeah.
And it's something you probably can lease purchase in our school system statute, but we are at least purchasing buses, you know, we don't want to get too much. It's a decision we could discuss, but again, it's still a cost, and then how much do you want to have out on the lease purchase at any one time, particularly when another bus any particular time. I mean, they would be eligible, I believe, as equipment for that. I know Hardy County, all those new field lights they put up in the last year or two, they did a big lease purchase agreement for those big field lights out there. But at the same time, you've still gotta set yourself up for X number of payments and budget all that stuff in. So it's a decision that would have to be made on that.
Anything else under facilities? Thank you. Nothing under old business, and then we get to new business and Energy Express.
Mrs. Stingo couldn't be here, so I'd like to move that to the next board agenda. She has a presentation she'd like to do.
Okay, so we'll wait for the next board meeting to handle that and the in-county transfers.
And I would recommend that we approve inter-county transfers. We have 3 students moving and 1 family from FES to Brandywine. That would be inter-county transfer number 17, number 18, and number 19 for school year 24-25.
Superintendent is recommending that we approve inter-county transfers for years 24-25, number 17, 18, and 19. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any questions? Then all in favor of approving the inter-county transfers, number 17, 18, and 19, please signify by saying aye. And opposed, no. Motion passes. The transfers are approved. Policies.
Well, we'll go over them. My mic just died, so I had to borrow Travis and Carrie's microphone, but I think we're back in business. So we have quite a few to catch us up to date with Neola on legislation. A lot of it at the state level, state board policy, state legislation, some federal. I will pull them up on the screen here in a minute. this is considered a first reading. So what I've given to you as board members, so this is all out here. It's on the board docs. Wilma, if you want any paper copies, let me know of anything. I mean, it's 61 policies, and it's a bunch of other things, but we'll do what we can. So these are out here right now. I'm going to go over the handouts here in a second as well. Now, if you do have your access to your board docs, and you want to see these in more detail, if you have access to it, if I go to policies, and I'll get back, and I go to draft, and I go to district request right now, I have this large December 2024, which is the bulk of these. Right now I can click on this, and then all these down here, all these individual policies, if you really want to go into detail on those. And then there's a Title IX one as well that's been updated, and Charles is working, might have a few minor things to change, and we've got that. Then there's an EDGAR, which is federal funding, which is more detailed and just catching up with making our policy in line with federal policies. To receive federal grants, we have to say we will do certain things. So there really aren't any decisions to be made on those. So I'm going to start here. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to go back to, so that's out there. Again, on board docs, if you log in, policies and draft, district requests. And that's what's out there now. So I'm going to go back now to our agenda, which is a separate PDF attachment. So I'm going to start here with, go over it in brief, this number 2, December 2024. I'm going to do a very basic summary of that. Now, what I did give to you separately as board members, I gave you with color information ones that apply to board members. So ones that apply to, so I'll start with these. And so all the 61 are out here with summaries of them. And I didn't print out all 61, obviously, for you. But I am going to start, so I'm going to start with, and this was who was working on, I'm going to start, for example, with the 142.3, right here, orientation and training. And so, clarify, House Bill 5514, this is bringing us in compliance, House Bill 5514. We know it went from 7 to 12, our policy didn't say that. And so, now, in this handout I gave you, and this is just for you as board members to show, it changes some actual language that's in there. It talks about state mandated orientation in the handout I gave you, what to do with that. It talks changing the 7 to 12 at the bottom of that first one. So it brings us up to date in our Pendleton County Policy Manual with that information. So that's an example of what that one does. And so anything in green is added to the current policy. Anything with a strike through in pink or so is being removed from current policy. So that's an example of orientation and training.
Now,
This-
JP, before you go on,
Yeah.
7 hours is still correct for this year, is, I believe, and we need 12 hours would be next year.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
You would know better than me on that, but yes, so that makes sense on that. So yes, as long as you at the board member level, so yes, that makes sense. So in that case, I guess we're getting a little bit ahead on that, but that at least will be in here now, will not have to be changed in the future. It will say the 12 hours on that. So that's a good point. The next policy, 143, is election, and so a couple of these are out here. 143, election, which does not a summary here, but it's here. A green just adds to 143, a candidate for the board shall be required to make a statement in which the candidate swears and affirms he or she has not been convicted of an offense in West Virginia Code. So that's added to 143. 146, resignation or removal. It's just at the bottom, it says West Virginia Code is now a reference. It says technical correction is usually very minor change, technical correction. So it's just a reference to West Virginia Code. Compensation, number 147, bylaw, which is also a policy for the board, raises the cap for the board members, okay, which we know, we went through that at the end of fiscal year '24. Some people got the raise, some people didn't. We had to take out our policy back then. We didn't want to mention any particular rate. And so now this green language gets into updated amount about how many meetings you can be paid for at the maximum rate based on those, what meetings count, what meetings don't count, and then updates the code statute as well based on that. So that's updating number 147 to compensation, which we had kind of done ahead of time back in the summer, but at the same time, this kind of takes it from our old policy manual to our new policy manual. It makes that be correct and put some other language that's in there based on that. Notice of meetings, 164, there's some technical corrections for 164. Changing days to days, so some grammar corrections with the that has main information that's in there. And then 165 is addressed. 165 is addressed with the video or audio recording, which again we are doing, and we make sure that we've got that done. It is now in our policy manual for meetings, talking about the recording and live streaming, how soon we have to have that posted and available. And then it talks about other items that are out there. And then it does say, under meetings, at a minimum of once per month, the agenda shall include, and it has the information that's part of the legislation that was out there. First and third Tuesdays is already in the policy manual. It's just making sure it's in there again in 165 under meetings. And then it goes down to, we don't really have the consent agenda. The emergency meeting, if it's not in green or red, it's already there now. Green is adding something. The red, strike through, is making sure it's not there. And there's a reference on page 3 of the 165 for the bylaws on that one for the meetings. 175.2, it simply talks about the board, if it considers a matter of public interest, shall join the West Virginia School Board Association, may join the National School Board Association. I think you had those options, but it goes into some details about travel expenses and those sort of things. This is House Bill 5514 again, as it relates to that. So that was an attempt just to give you a little bit additional that was out there as it pertains to board members directly. If I go then, so I'm not going to go in again in detail of every single policy, but I will scroll down here. Now, 1110, it's kind of some duplicative material and items that we feel are covered better in other parts of the policy, so we're not doing anything with 1110. It's in the particular update from the Neola, but we will not be including that at this time. If we need to, for some reason, add that later, we can do that. So we go from 1240, evaluation of the superintendent, and then all down the list. Some of it is very minor. If it says technical correction, it's very minor. If it says LSIC, it's some updated about the LSICs and what they're supposed to do. Some of those policies came out. Again, it just goes down through. There, most of them don't have a very large amount of change, but again, it's based on state board policy, state legislation, or federal legislation. So again, they're out there. We can give you detail, any more of these that you would like detail on. We will clean these up, have them ready for public review. They're mostly all there right now. So again, I'm just kind of scrolling through. Page 12, the Teacher Bill of Rights that was passed last year kind of puts that language for the Teacher Bill of Rights into policy. The grievance procedure was revised a bit, policy 3340. So you can take this time before we come back at our next session, however long Mr. Hedrick wants to put this out for comment the next time we come back to this. We did a critical need for bus drivers at a prior meeting. This is some kind of technical correction, very minor. Some dates were made current, corrected, contained to contained, for example. So it's not all substantive. Some of it is just very minor. The Hope Scholarship is updated in here, some of those requirements for Hope Scholarship. Open enrollment for resident students, transferring into the county, transferring within the county. Some of those options are just updated there to reflect state law. Senate Bill 602, a cardiac care plan for schools. So student accidents, cardiac arrest for that one, information. Suicide prevention, revised and renamed, talks about some training updates, the amount of training. Often training should be handled in there. Graduation requirements, what the state recommends, and also we will have an update there for what we require if you're in Pendleton County. Again, these are basically all current policies that are being revised by this particular update based upon state, in most cases, state law or policy. School safety, I'm just scrolling down through. A brand new policy, 8700, is the one new policy to be added to the policy manual, policy 8700. So there are a couple of choices to make, but it does require the school system to have a policy for lactating employees. And so we now will have a policy once this is approved on 8700. Outside groups doesn't change a whole lot. It does encourage support patriotic societies having a chance to speak with, to join their organizations, and so there's procedures to be followed for that case. That student participation is voluntary, but that is House Bill 4863 as it goes through that. And so again, this is a summary at the bottom, but they are all included on the board docs if you have questions about a particular policy that's out there for review. If there's anything you wanted to see now, within reason, we could probably take a look at it. But this is the most we've had at one time, I would say. Maybe with the whole policy manual was obviously the most at one time. But 61, and then updates that are out there for that. So that's information that's out there. I will take a quick look now at Title IX. Jerica and then Mr. Hedrick really spent a lot of time looking at the Title IX update because there was a lot of confusion back 6 or 8 months ago. There were some new requirements, and then there was thrown in doubt by some court cases, and then some of that got rescinded and had to go back to the Title IX information that was out there. So it was kind of presented to us in June, but we were told to put it on hold to see what happened with the court case. So now it's been settled. Some of the new regulations were rolled back, so to speak. And so Title IX by itself is 21 pages. 21 pages. We've always had a Title IX policy and requirement. This updates us to the standards that Neola has brought forth to go through all this information about Title IX that's out there. And so we did not put a direct link. We had our old language out in our Neola. So this brings everything over up to date in Title IX. So Title IX coordinator, for example, even though last year at this time when we did the policy manual, we had Nicole's name in here. Well, it's got to be Jerica now, and if that ever changes, we've got to go back in and change that. Most policies don't have people's names in them. Title IX requires us to have contact information that's in there. And there's all sorts of different, about investigation and the grievance process and who's supposed to do what based upon certain things, reporting. And again, there's 21 pages of information plus some notes from Neola on implementation. So it's a very lengthy policy that's in there, but there is information, how long to keep records. Very detailed, which something like this would need to be. So it's been vetted by their legal counsel and with the federal requirements, and so it will be a very up-to-date, very accurate policy once everything is finalized and approved based on that. So there's one additional, again, I won't go into detail, it is the EDGAR. EDGAR is the federal funds, so that's just for federal grants. We have to have certain things that we will have conflicts of interest, which is all things we already have. It's just adopting the policies for EDGAR dealing with cash management of grants, cost principles of spending grants, procurement, travel and expenses. We have to follow these now. Our county policies didn't always have the exact wording that they should have. Now they will, and they'll be updated to match everything the federal government says we should have. With eSurf and the reviews, they're asking increasingly, what's your policy on this? Where does it say in writing, you will do this in a certain situation, whether it's inventory or surplus property or all those things. So 3 groups that are out there. The volume 16, number 2, December, which is the main group of policies, the EDGAR, the federal grants, and the Title IX. So again, board docs, or if you need additional information, let me know, but that's, unless anybody else has anything to add, that's pretty much our first reading on those policies.
Yeah, my recommendation to approve the policies for first reading, and the second reading will be on our board meeting on March the 4th.
Our superintendent's rec,
Yeah, I can get ahold of you for something, he knows that I wanna see a little more about it.
If you get me information, I'll figure out a way to get it to you.
Okay,
Yep.
well, you can send
I
it,
can even maybe put it on a flash drive or something for you.
okay,
Yeah, or it can come in, we'll take a look at it.
okay.
our superintendent's recommended that we approve all these policies as a first reading, with the second reading being done on our first March meeting, March 4th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Do I have a motion and a second? Any discussion or any questions? If there are none, then all in favor of approving these policies as a first reading with our final reading, our second reading to come on March 4th, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. That finishes us up under new business, and we move down to school improvement, student achievement.
Tomorrow was the textbook caravan in Morgantown. That's still going to be held, but after looking at the weather forecast and things like that, we've decided that we're going to not put people on the road tomorrow due to the possibility of the weather and freezing rain. So we'll look at other opportunities. They do virtual presentations of the programs, and then I'll just reach out to each of the vendors and have them send us some samples in, which is what we used to do anyway, and we'll still get to take a look at the social studies and the preschool materials. We do have our monthly science of reading meeting with our regional folks tomorrow. That's math and reading. So several of us at the board office plus our elementary principals are involved in that. That'll occur at 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning, just to give you that update. And I believe during the presentation earlier, they mentioned about the deadline for the benchmark data. The schools have until Friday to get that data into us, and they'll have a few makeup days if they do miss some kids. And then next week, the state department will pull our data from Renaissance to compare from our first benchmark to our second benchmark. So that's a pretty important one. And like they said, the lack of instructional time will probably go into account there with some of that. So we'll have to try to make up some data and make up some ground in the third round of that. So that's all I have, unless Mr. Hedrick wants to add anything.
Any questions? Superintendent's update.
The only real update I have is if we have additional weather days, we'll start with our makeups on our first OS day, which is March 17th. Our second OS day, of course, is the 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st, our week of spring break, and we work our way across there to begin with.
So if you miss, you'll start taking those days away.
Our next time we
Next
take a
time.
day off, yes, we
Okay.
will start taking those days away.
How about delays? Are we still? have they added up
Delays were
yet?
okay with that, but we can't afford to miss any more days without taking some of our OS days, which are makeup days too.
Any questions here? Conference and meeting update.
The School Board Association meeting begins this Thursday at the Marriott and goes Thursday, Friday, and Saturday morning. And I think that's the only one we have until the next board meeting.
I think that concludes everything that we have for our business. Our next regular board meeting would be Tuesday, February 18th, here at the board office at 5:30. and I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So
So,
moved.
second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion passes. We are adjourned.